Many people, myself included, will start teaching leave it indoors by placing a treat on the ground in front of our stationary dog while we ask them to leave it alone. This is a great way to start conditioning the cue and to start building impulse control.
Here. Leave it. Yes.
However, even if you progress to a more advanced version where you're far away and you're tossing the food at them, this doesn't necessarily mean that leave it will work out on walks when your dog isn't actually starting from a stationary position.
Leave it.
I want to show you how to bridge that difficulty so that your dog actually listens when you ask them to leave it, regardless of what kind of sidewalk snack they might find. There are a lot of unsafe items that your dog might find on walks, so having a reliable way to verbally ask them to leave something alone could save their life. This video is going to explain how I taught my dog a reliable leave it cue, regardless of whatever she might possibly find. There's two things that I want to mention before we jump into the training. First, I want to point out that this video will be different than my usual tutorials because I'm going to be demonstrating the process with my dog rather than filming with an untrained dog like I usually do. I'll explain more about why I'm doing it this way at the end of the video, and I think most viewers will be quite excited about the reason. Second, in order to follow this tutorial, your dog needs to already know a basic leave it cue and listen to it about 99% of the time when they're in a stationary position. If you haven't reliably taught that yet, I'll link a stepwise tutorial here for how I taught the skill to Kiki. Kiki also had a huge history of stealing food if she was left alone with it, so I'll also link a counter surfing tutorial here if that's something else that you're struggling with. I would love to hear two things in the comments. First, what does your dog struggle to resist on walks? And two, what is the grossest thing that your dog has ever found and eaten? When my dog was younger, she found and ate a Band-Aid that she found out on a walk. We started this training soon after. Okay, let's discuss how to train a more advanced leave it that actually works on walks.
So for this training, I use old take-home containers that I've drilled holes into. This is important because you want your dog to be able to smell the food that's inside, but not actually be able to get to it when they are just learning. That's important because if they ignore your leave it cue when they're just learning and they actually get the food inside, they've been heavily rewarded for ignoring you. So at the beginning, I like to be cautious, have them smell it, but not have access. And then eventually I actually take the lids off for training, and that's when you're gonna know that it'll actually work in the real world. So for this training, I like to progress the difficulty gradually so the dog really learns solidly what leave it means. In the first container, I put her kibble. If she ignores that when I say leave it, then she gets rewarded with treats. In the next container, the next difficulty level, I put the treats themselves in there. If she ignores that when I say leave it, I reward her with something quite high value. So I have a bit of pork here. And then in the last container, I'm gonna put the pork. If she ignores that when I say leave it, she gets rewarded with her ultimate favorite, which is ground beef. It is really important when you're doing this training for you to know which of these your dog prefers because you do want to make sure that you're progressively offering something higher and higher value. This is how I suggest testing that.
If you were to offer your dog beef and lettuce at the same time, which do you think that they'd be more likely to choose? Beef is the easy guess. But what if instead I offered beef and pork? Typically, when offered two items at the same time, dogs will choose their higher value option first. Regardless of which hand it's in, my dog always selects ground beef first, so for her, I can conclude that ground beef is higher value than pork. Make sure that you test this with the items that you're considering putting into the containers so that you can be confident that the reward you're offering for listening when you say leave it is higher value than what they would have gotten by not listening. So just to recap, for training, I would use 3 to 4 containers filled with progressively higher value foods. If my dog leaves the kibble container, her reward is liver treats. If she leaves the liver treat container, she gets pork chop, and if she leaves the pork chop container, she gets ground beef.
It's important that you understand that there's two things that are going to make this harder for your dog regardless of which item you're using. So the first is how close they are to the food. Obviously, the closer they are to it, the harder it is for them to listen to that leave it cue. So typically when I start training this, I make sure that they're at least a couple feet away when I first say the cue. This helps break the steps down into something that's more manageable. And then the next part is how far away from you they are. So obviously if they're closer to the food and you're about 15 feet away, it's going to be a lot harder for your dog to listen to you when you say leave it versus if you're standing right there.
My dog was pretty uninterested in the kibble and the liver tree containers when I filmed this, so I'm just going to demo with pork and beef filled containers. However, please remember that at home, you'll repeat all these steps with each container since your dog is just learning the new skill. Progress slowly and do many reps at each difficulty level to make sure that you really solidify the skill. Have your dog on a harness and leash so that you can intervene if you need to during training.
Okay.
If the dog ignores the leave it cue, I like to walk my hands up the leash and lure them away. Since we're using containers with lids right now, our dog can't self-reward for ignoring the leave it cue. However, if you do need to do this, take it as a sign that your dog wasn't ready for that difficulty level and take a step back in training. To set up for training, fill your first container and hide that container somewhere in your house without your dog seeing it. Next, walk your dog over to that area and say leave it when they show interest in the container, but they're still a few feet away from it. When they listen to the cue, say your marker word to tell them that they got it right and then reward them. Take a break by walking a little bit around your house to reset your dog, and then slowly practice getting closer and closer to the container before cueing leave it. Eventually, I like to really let them sniff and investigate that container before cueing.
Leave it.
We want to make sure that leave it still works when our dog is really interested in something. As you progress to more difficult containers, it's helpful to practice in different rooms to help your dog generalize the skill.
Leave it. Yes. Leave it. Yes.
Once your dog is really reliable with the leave
Leave
it
it?
cue,
Yes.
I encourage you to practice with the container lids off to make it more like real life where they will have access to eating the thing that they're interested
Leave
in.
it. Yes. Leave it. Yes. Leave it. Yes. Leave it. Yes. Leave it. Yes.
Once you've progressed through all of the containers, including the highest value one, I encourage you to repeat this whole process out in your yard to solidify the skill before you try it on walks. The more successful repetitions that you get using the leave it cue, the more immediately listening to that cue becomes a default behavior. This is important when we use it in the real world with stuff that's really interesting to our dog. We want it to be an automatic response rather than something that they spend time considering. Once your dog is ready to try this game on walks, I usually just bring the two higher value distractions. It's also really helpful if a second person can come on the walk, get a little bit ahead of you and your dog, and place the container somewhere without your dog seeing to make this training more like real life.
Leave it. Yes.
Initially start by cueing leave it from a farther distance again, and then slowly let your dog get closer and closer before cueing. Out on walks, there's going to be things that your dog finds before you see them coming, so it's really important that we do let them practice in close proximity.
Leave it. Yes.
Initially, I start training with the lid on so that they can't self-reward, and then again progress to having it off to emulate real life.
Leave it. Yes. Leave it. Yes.
You may also start to notice moments where your dog ignores the containers without being asked to. Make sure that you heavily reward those moments. With enough repetitions and conditioning, your dog will have such a strong reinforcement history that leave it will work immediately on anything that they might find on walks. If you have any questions about this training, please let me know in the comments.
Here, leave it. Yes.
I want to take a quick break to thank Hightail Hikes for this amazing hands-free leash.
Yes.
It's now the only leash that I use to walk my dog. Hightail Hikes custom makes biothane leashes in a variety of lengths and colors and widths so you can get the appropriate one for your dog's weight. I love biothane because it's strong, lightweight, and easy to clean. I'll provide a link to Hightail Hikes in the video description and the comments if you want to take a look. The coupon code HAPPY10 will get you 10% off your entire order. Now let's talk about why I demoed this training with my dog rather than with a client's dog. I do plan on refilming this whole process with an untrained dog like my normal tutorials, but I wanted to upload this demo now because having a reliably trained Leave It cue outdoors is an important prerequisite for the heavily requested tutorial that I'm uploading next week. Prey drive. I'm going to show you how I trained my very high prey drive dog to finally stop chasing animals, including birds, cats, squirrels, and rabbits. Happy training. I'll see you next week.